era where ball movement and shooting has taken over the NBA, we tend to look down on isolation basketball, and it makes sense why. It's the most obvious form of hero ball and is also generally one of the most inefficient plays. Since Synergy started breaking down NBA plays by type in 2004, plays involving off-ball cuts and transition plays generate 1.18 and 1.12 points per possession respectively, making those the most efficient. Then comes pick and rolls, which generate 0.97 points per possession, and then the isolation at 0.78. But in the playoffs and the end of close games, the least efficient play in basketball becomes much more frequent. In general, isolations only account for 12% of all plays ran, but in the last 5 minutes of regulation of close games, that usage rate rises to 19%. And in the last 5 playoff runs, isolation frequency is increased by almost 2 percentage points, as well as the scoring efficiency on isolations. So today we're going to answer 2 important questions. For a play that tends to be very inefficient, why is it used more often in more important games, and why is it more successful in the playoffs? Before we answer those questions, let's go back to the 2013-14 season. The San Antonio Spurs dominated the league with their ball movement to another level. And when you watch these clips, a lot of it starts from the initial pick and roll. Before the 2015 Warriors came about, many teams guarded pick and rolls with a hard hedge. A hard hedge in basketball is when a defender guarding a player without the ball jumps in the way of an opponent who has the ball to stop the opponent with the ball from getting to the basket or blocking the ball handler from entering the painted area of the court. Naturally, what happens in this scenario is that the roll man is open and operates using a 4-on-3, which is a huge advantage, and the Spurs use that to carve many defenses up. With 2 traditional big men back in the day, they have a hard time getting back into the play, and the Warriors used that advantage in 2015 to help win their first title. And during the finals, they first implemented the death lineup, where they started Andre Iguodala instead of Andrew Bogut, which created 5-out spacing, but more importantly allowed them to switch any screens. The power of switching is that it forces teams out of their initial offensive set and forces them to play isolation basketball. Here in Game 7, Curry sets a screen for Klay, but because the Cavs decided to switch, Klay can't get downhill and instead is forced to isolate against Kyrie, which got the Warriors out of their rhythm. And because of this, teams decided to imitate small ball, and the goal became finding players that can switch. And Chris Paul talks about the power of switching here.
Let me tell you this about switching. Our team was so good in Houston when we went to switching. So I'll tell you a quick story about the playoffs and why our season was so good in Houston. We played the entire season when I was in Houston one way, basically defensively. And it was basically to get ready for Golden State, right? I know, me and Bubs, we didn't have this conversation before. We played the whole season learning how to switch screens and the ISO ball that everybody hated. We played that way because we knew we were going to have to do that in order to beat Golden State. Because just to connect you to the Clippers a little bit, with the Clippers, our offense was so potent. Like, we was just nice, like clicking. Who gave us problems, Bubs?
Teams that switched.
Golden State. We play Golden State.
We had like an 11-game losing streak at one point against them.
And let me tell you, of course somebody could say it was us. Like, it was us. You know what I mean? It was us. But what I'm saying is the reason they would give us issues is because our offense with the slip screen and going to get JJ and threes, every time we played against any other team, we killed them with that. But when we played against Golden State, and they switched screens and did all this stuff, we couldn't run none of our stuff. Could we, Buzz? Like, we couldn't.
The continuity was gone. Yeah. So we ended up having a lot of possessions ended 5 or 6 seconds on the shot clock in isolation.
So why are isolations used more frequently in the playoffs? The first reason is because teams are more likely than not going to take away your best offensive sets, and the best way to do that is through switching. In Game 4, the Suns ran the dribble handoff inside the three-point line for Devin Booker, which got him a lot of great looks. But in the fourth quarter, the Bucks switched the dribble handoff, which made it more difficult to get that same jumper. And so at the end of games, instead of running a set play which has the potential to get broken up and turn into an ISO with less than 10 seconds on the shot clock, teams would prefer to have their best players isolate, which leads into my second point. Isolations tend to be more successful in the playoffs because better players are doing it more frequently. Here's a chart of some superstars' isolation frequencies in this past playoffs. Players that are highly inefficient isolation players such as John Wall, De'Aaron Fox, and Colin Sexton drag the average isolation points per possession scoring down. But in the playoffs, we get to see superstars isolate more, which tends to increase that average. The other reason isolations are more successful and thus become more frequent is because of the rules, especially hand checking. Without hand checking, defenders are forced to slide their feet to stay in front. This makes playing defense extremely difficult because it's much harder to prevent players from going where they want to go. On defense, you already have a disadvantage since you're trying to anticipate the offensive player's moves. That's why even the best defenders today have a hard time guarding the best offensive players. For example, James Harden is isolating Andre Iguodala, and he gets him with a great crossover which draws help and gets Tucker an open look. And here with the game on the line and Kawhi Leonard isolating Klay Thompson, who's one of the best on-ball defenders in the league, the Warriors send help right when he starts making a move, which forces Leonard to give the ball up, which leads into my last point. As you can see on the last two plays I showed, the player initially isolating didn't even shoot the ball. But as games get tighter and teams know your best offensive sets, many teams believe putting the ball in your best player's hands and allowing them to create for themselves and others is the best way to score. And to show this, let me show you this 3-play sequence. So Curry and Draymond run the pick and roll and the Rockets switch Tucker onto Curry. On this first play, Curry drives past Tucker and scores. Next possession down, Curry gets the switch and he dances on Tucker and nails the 3. So even though Tucker played relatively good defense, Curry has beaten him twice, which was enough for the Rockets to play the next pick and roll differently. So now Tucker and Gordon blitz Curry, which allows Draymond to play 4-on-3, which leads to a Klay 3. An average fan may think that's great ball movement, but in reality it's because of Curry's success against Tucker on isolations that allowed that movement to even start. So I hope that explains a little bit of why teams tend to ISO more at the end of games and in the playoffs. As dreaded and ugly as it can look, isolation play will always be necessary at some point when teams can take away your best offensive sets or when plays break down. Having a star that can break down defenses with moves is probably the best thing a team can have today, and with the league becoming more talented, you often need at least 2 stars that can break down defenders to become a true contender. Before I end this video, if you have a video idea, I have a Google form in the description below. Besides that, if you want more NBA content, follow my Instagram at the Coaches Report and my Twitter, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.